Communications Workers Union General Secretary Aubrey Tshabalala joins me in studio. So, Mr. Tshabalala, if I can start with just asking, what is your view on him being dismissed now after he's suspended?
Well, I think there's a number of serious misfollowing procedures within the company first. Amongst others, it's unheard of that when a staff member is dismissed, email will be circulated amongst workers, firstly. And second is that we believe that everyone must be given a fair opportunity to present his or her case when dismissed. So basically it shows that the citizen is not actually willing to engage in the processes that are outlined by the law of our country in terms of how we're governing issues that relates to worker relations. But it also vindicates us that citizen itself has been at a particular agenda to advance the anti-Zuma campaign. We are not saying that they should support Zuma, we are not for that. But censoring of stories that seeks to suggest that they actually follow the line where it says Pravin Gordhan have been found in the corruption and so on and so forth. That shows that our media, particularly the private sector media, is been biased throughoutly and has been feeding the public to consume what is their point of view, but what is not necessarily the truthful reflection of the news in general.
Well, we also have a Forum of Journalists for Transformation President, Piet Rampedi, on the phone line. Mr. Rampedi, can I ask as well, what is your views on him now being dismissed after he was suspended?
Look, we're actually urging him to approach the Labour Court, and we're glad that he has decided to do so, because clearly this systematic abuse by Caxton is part of a wider and deliberate strategy to make sure that black journalists are not treated fairly by the system. And we are not also surprised, because you would also recall that what happened earlier was that they initially offered him a so-called golden handshake to leave because they said his services were no longer needed. After he refused to accept that offer, they then concocted charges against him, claiming that he had been guilty of misconduct. So you can see that his fate was long sealed, and whatever they were trying to do was not genuine. It was one of those incidences where they were clearly trying to buy time in order to get rid of him. And we are also worried because Citizen is one of those papers which, was actually on the right track under Stephen Motale. He took over a paper which was leader-wide, racist, reporting about, potholes and missing cats in the northern suburbs. He made it a decent reading. Politically, currently, if you read that paper, you'll see that they're covering stories in a good way. They're also breaking stories under Stephen Motale. But now, because he doesn't think like the media bosses, because he's independent, he's refusing to be compliant, they got rid of him, which is a very sad day, because we know that editors in South Africa have got an obligation alongside their journalists to report without fear, favor, or prejudice, and to give all sides of the story in a platform. But for now, he's just being victimized because he dared to be a patriotic citizen and a model editor in South Africa.
Mr. Rampedi, Mr. Tshabalala has told us that the due processes was not followed in his dismissal. What do you think about the processes that was followed? And if the right procedures were followed, do you think it will be hard for him to fight the dismissal?
Look, no procedure was followed at all. I'll give you, actually a blow-by-blow account of what happened as we understand it. They offered him a so-called golden handshake after he published a series on former Finance Minister Trevor Manuel, and they accused him of having a personal vendetta against the former Finance Minister. He then, asked to, in fact, they offered him a golden handshake to leave quietly. He refused to accept it and said, as long as the conditions were such that he was going to be gagged, he would not accept it, because he wanted to be able to speak out and condemn all these unsavory developments. They then came back to him and said, okay, it's fine, because you're not willing to leave. We're putting you on suspension for misconduct. He then said, okay, it's fine, I'll go home and then I'll come back for the DC. They said the misconduct was pending the outcome of, the suspension was pending the outcome of a DC. While awaiting the DC, they said to him he needed to send them reasons why there shouldn't be a hearing by 1 o'clock yesterday. He wrote them a letter. He wrote back to them and said, look, just go ahead with the DC. I don't think I should be giving reasons why the DC shouldn't take place. By around 5 o'clock late afternoon, they sent him an email saying his services had been terminated. So you can see that they were not willing to subject him to due process in the form of a DC because they had already decided his fate. They were just buying time and trying to find excuses to get rid of him. So we're not surprised, and we're urging him to forge ahead with this case. We're fully behind him because we see him as the latest victim of this systematic onslaught on black editors and black journalists for racist reasons. He's the latest victim of discrimination, exploitation, media inequality, and racism, an institutionalized culture of racism. And we're saying he mustn't take this thing lying down, because if he does, tomorrow it will be other people. So we need to fight this system now and show the likes of Terry Mollman of Caxton and Andrew Brenomo of Times Media Group and Ghost Becker of Media 24 and Roger Jardine of Prime Media that the time for them to treat black journalists with disrespect is up. Black journalists deserve respect, and we're not going to be treated like we are being done a favor when we get jobs in these newsrooms, because we've gone to school and we cannot allow a situation where we are only tolerated or accommodated in these newsrooms depending on our socio-economic and political orientation. We've got a right to practice as journalists without fear, favor, or prejudice, and without being subjected to a culture of discrimination and racism.